Hi everyone, it's Raquel here. In today's video, I want to share with you what I do every single year at this time. We have just finished the Feast of Unleavened Bread, where we have been enjoying a week of only matzah, only unleavened bread. We've had it so many different ways this year: savory, sweet, crunchy, soft. It's been a delicious week. I love matzah, even though it is considered the bread of affliction. It's delicious. But now that that week is over, it's time to get back into bread making. For me, I am an avid sourdough baker every other week of the year besides the Passover week. I love making bread. I love eating bread, honestly. And so I'm going to make a sourdough starter. Until the modern age, when people just bought the bread at the store, then this would be the time, right after the Feast of Unleavened Bread has ended, to start your sourdough starter once again. And one of the neat things about it is that in 50 days, we are commanded to bring loaves to the temple and to the priest, which obviously we can't do right now, but in times past they would have done. So it's kind of like starting your sourdough starter is almost like anticipating the coming of Shavuot, or the Feast of Weeks, 50 days from now. So today I'm going to share with you how to make a sourdough starter. If you're here to learn how to make a sourdough starter and you don't have a clue what I was just talking about, that's cool. This channel is all about enthusiastically and practically living out God's word in your heart, home, and family. Tossing out leavened bread and then bringing it back in is one of the commandments of God, and so that's why I was talking about the Feast of Unleavened Bread and Shavuot. You should look into it if you have no idea what I'm talking about. But you're still going to get great information here about how to start a sourdough starter. I've been making my own sourdough starter for the past 5 years. My first year, someone gave me sourdough starter, and so that's how I kind of dipped my feet into it. But since then, I just make my own. I catch my own wild yeast, and I love how sustainable that is. I love the simple process and, the lack of special equipment and special ingredients that it requires. It's just an awesome way to bake bread in a sustainable way and in a healthy way. So let me share with you how to do it. You can do it. It's very easy to do. So let's get into what you need to make the sourdough starter, your supplies. The first thing you'll need is a jar or a bowl to keep your sourdough starter in. I prefer a jar that has measurements on the side because that lets me know how much sourdough starter I have. I have heard not to keep your sourdough starter in a stainless steel container. I have in the past. I never had any issues with it, but just throwing that out there. I use glass the majority of the time. You'll also need something to cover your sourdough starter with to keep flies out and any bugs or dust, things like that. I like to use this organic unbleached muslin cloth that I bought off of Amazon, and then I just secure it with a rubber band. But you could use a coffee filter, a paper towel. You could even use like a normal kitchen towel. Nothing fancy is required. This is just what I don't remember how much it was, but it was very inexpensive, and I bought 9 yards of it. So it has definitely lasted me through the years, and I just cut fresh little squares as I need them. Sometimes I make them bigger so that they can go over gallon-sized jars or over a bowl, whatever I'm using, and I wash them and reuse them until the Feast of Unleavened Bread comes, and then I toss them. That's just one of my choices. Instead of washing them again, I just toss them at that time. The next thing you'll need is your flour. You can use pretty much any kind of flour. You can use whole wheat, you can use all-purpose, white, whatever. This is some fresh ground whole wheat flour, and then you'll need something to stir with. You don't have to use a wooden spoon. You really just need something that is long enough to reach into the bottom of your container without your fingers, getting into your sourdough. You could use a stainless steel or plastic or metal spoon. That's all okay because you're only going to be touching your sourdough for a very short period of time. So you don't have to worry about any chemicals or metals leaching into your sourdough. With that short of exposure, there's not an issue. And the last thing you're going to need is water. Now that you know what you need, what supplies you need, I'm going to show you the process for actually making the sourdough starter. This is going to blow your mind how simple it is. You could do it right now with me if you want to. So grab your supplies. Let's do this thing. All right, so take your jar and take your flour. How much flour do you use? Really, it doesn't matter. I usually like to start with a small amount of flour when I'm first establishing my sourdough starter. So this is a 1/2 cup of flour. You could do a 1/4 cup, a 1/3 cup. What measurement scoop do you have that's clean? Use that. That's kind of how I base my decision here, is which scoop is clean. And then you're going to dump that into your jar. Next, I'm going to get equal amount of water. I'm not going to continue to do equals amount of water once this is established, but I'll talk about that more when I talk about maintaining your sourdough starter. But for establishing, for actually forming the sourdough starter, I'm going to do equal amount of water. So a half a cup of flour, a half a cup of water. I'm using well water, so it doesn't have any chemicals or anything like that in it. If you're using city water, you could leave your water out on the countertop, let all the chlorine dissipate, evaporate out of it. You're just going to mix that all up. Make sure you scrape the bottom so that there's not any dry flour left. You want it all to be wet. Now that I am finished mixing that all up, I'm just going to cover it and secure it with a rubber band. There you have it. You just made a sourdough starter. Wasn't that super simple? Now that officially is not sourdough starter. There's no yeast in there. There's no bacteria in there yet. It's going to take you a couple of days for you to catch your wild yeast and bacteria from the air and for it to ferment all together and become a true sourdough starter that you can use in bread and pancakes and things like that. The key here though is if you want it to truly become a sourdough starter, you need to feed it. So tomorrow morning I'm going to come back and give it more flour and more water in equal parts. The only rule here that you need to remember is when you're establishing your sourdough starter, you don't want to feed it more fresh flour than the amount of sourdough you currently have. I have a half a cup of sourdough in this jar. I don't want to give it a cup of flour. I want to do a half a cup of fresh flour or less when I feed it. And that's only a rule whenever you're establishing your starter. That doesn't necessarily matter once it's well established, but we'll get to that in another video. So just continue every morning. Give it fresh flour and fresh water, stir it in and cover it, leave it for another day. And then after about 3 days of doing that, you're going to be seeing bubbles and you're going to start noticing like, hey, I think this maybe rose up a little bit. That's a great sign that you've caught your own wild yeast and your own bacteria. You've made a sourdough starter. I do have a quick tip for you here, and that is to leave a bowl of flour right next to your sourdough starter. And that helps me to not be lazy about feeding my sourdough. I mean, it's so simple to do. It really takes 5 seconds. But when you have extra steps of getting the flour out of your pantry or wherever you keep it and, you know, whatever, it just makes life a little bit more like, oh, maybe I can't do that. You have another excuse. So I keep a bowl of flour on the countertop next to my sourdough starter and just takes away those excuses. Look at that. Isn't that beautiful? Isn't it gorgeous? Sourdough starter in the making. Let me know in the comments if you have any questions about establishing a sourdough starter, about feeding it from here on out, and about how to use it. I am going to try to make a follow-up video for this so that you know how to use a sourdough starter once it's already made. I love making sourdough and I would love to share what I know with you if that's something that you're interested in. So definitely leave your questions and your thoughts in the comments below and I'll try to make a video addressing those questions that you may have. Alright guys, so that's it. That's how you make a sourdough starter. Let me know how it goes. I pray that all of you are blessed and you're doing well, that you had a fantastic Feast of Unleavened Bread and Passover meal. Like this video if you enjoyed it. Subscribe if you haven't already. I pray that God will bless you and keep you. I'll talk with you later. Bye-bye.